Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm J.P. Milliken, Chancellor of CUNY, and I want to offer my personal welcome to this Facebook Live event on a critical issue for all of us. CUNY supports DACA. Whether you stay with us for just a few minutes or for the entire hour and a half, this is our opportunity to have experts on hand to discuss the details of President Trump's order to phase out the DACA program and to answer your questions and concerns about how to respond if you have been or might be seeking DACA status. I want to begin by emphasizing a few issues that are important to all of us at CUNY. Few matters are more central to who we are and what we do than our open access to immigrants. CUNY has long been the statue of liberty of universities. Our great strength is our diversity, and one of the most special features of CUNY is the large number of immigrants who have been part of our classes since the beginning. About 40% of our undergraduates at CUNY are foreign-born, and I want to thank all of our students for bringing us their drive, their creativity, energy, dreams, passion, and fresh ideas and perspective. We are better as a university, New York is better as a city, and our country is better because of your presence here. I know that everyone's followed the news since the announcement Tuesday about the phasing out of DACA. It provides temporary status to almost 800,000 immigrants across the country who were brought to the United States as minors. Having this temporary status, which allows recipients to work legally with protection from deportation, has been extraordinarily important to families and communities across the country, and certainly in New York. In our state, more than 40,000 lives have changed for the better as a result of DACA. We see that every day at CUNY. That's why we've worked so hard to help over 700 of our DACA students obtain private scholarships from the Dream US, more than any university in the country. I want to be clear about how important our DACA students are to CUNY. Yesterday, I introduced the Attorney General of the state of New York, his announcement to lead a lawsuit from 15 states to stop the president's order. And we're working with our elected representatives in Congress to let them know how important DACA is to this university, to this city, to this state, and our country. One of the great reflections of our commitment to immigrants, and particularly immigrant students at CUNY, is Citizenship Now. It's the most extensive university-based immigration law service program in the country. And for the past 20 years, Citizenship Now has helped CUNY students and other New Yorkers on the path to U.S. citizenship. We're also very proud of our immigration law clinic at the CUNY Law School, the nation's premier public interest law school. But today's for all of you, for those who are participating in this Facebook Live session. We're delighted to have some of CUNY's most dedicated advocates and experts with us. We also have leaders from New York State and New York City government. We are fortunate in New York with the leadership of Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio, who have made the welcoming and the support and the protection of immigrants in New York one of the highest priorities. So again, thank you to all of you who are participating, and particularly to those CUNY students participating, for your passion, your dedication, and for being such positive members of our community. Now, it's my great pleasure now to introduce the moderator of today's session and turn this over to her and the experts. I'm delighted to be joined by the City University of New York's talented new General Counsel and Vice Chancellor for Legal Affairs, Loretta Martinez. Loretta, show's yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Milliken, for your leadership and commitment in providing educational access and opportunity for all CUNY students, and today especially for your continuing support of our dreamers. Before I turn to our experts, I want to remind you to please post your questions in the comment box below. CUNY students can also call or email Citizenship Now for an in-person consultation at 212-652-2055 or citizenshipnowinfo@cuny.edu. Additional information and the list of resources mentioned today by today's panelists will be posted on our DACA website at www.cuny.edu/DACA. Our first presenter today is Dr. Laura Gonzalez Murphy, Director of the New York State Office for New Americans. In this capacity, she oversees the operation of the office's 27 opportunity centers across the state, a model of immigrant integration in the country. Prior to this position, she was an Empire State Fellow at the New York State Department of State, where she assisted in the program administration of ONA, helped promote the governor's anti-human trafficking campaign, and also served as the department's language access coordinator. She has also served as a consultant on the state civil society relationship on migration issues with the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars and the Mexican Congress, and has presented on this issue at various national and international forums, most recently at the UN's Mayoral Forum on Migration and Development in Berlin, Germany. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to discuss and present the services that the governor is providing for all DACA, all immigrants, and particularly in these moments to our DACA students and the youth in New York State. I wanted to reiterate that on Monday, Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, stated that we have a federal government that is antithetical to everything we believe as New Yorkers. The war that is being declared on immigrants is something that we need to stand up against, and he clearly stated that we are all immigrants, not just the white, not just the other countries, but everyone here in the state that is an immigrant and a New Yorker. We all have to stand up as all real Americans. Unless you're a Navajo, and he even stated that, and this is something I find very, very realistic, is unless you're a Navajo or a Sioux or an Apache, you're not a real American. So really, everybody that is in New York State, immigrant, we are real Americans. This week's news from the White House to rescind DACA is, to me, no doubt inhumane, frustrating, and heartbreaking. But it's also an opportunity to re-energize, organize, and make our voices heard. And many have been doing that in this last few days, and we've noticed it. And I want to give my thank you and appreciation to all those efforts, such as this one, for the opportunity that we're providing, to defend and to stand up for all immigrants. The governor and the Office for New Americans, which, as you stated, I represent and I'm the director of, stands in solidarity and support to all of those affected by the federal decisions. We're doing so in many, many ways, and one particular example is our hotline. Right now and today, yesterday and today, our hotline has been providing information across the state to anyone calling, specifically all immigrants calling, but right now for DACA, we're holding a call-in partnership with Univision. Again, as I stated, it ran yesterday, it's running again today from 4 to 7. And we have it staffed by individuals that are knowledgeable in immigration law, attorneys, DOJ accredited, and that will do their best to answer your questions and also to create some calmness for everybody, because it's really not a moment to be extremely scared. Yes, it is scary, but we can do, we can stand up and we can take hope and we can protect and defend ourselves. So I want to mention the hotline, which is an 800-566-7636. This hotline is the Office for New Americans hotline, which operates every week normally, but right now we're focusing again those from 4 to 7 p.m., those special hours, to answer DACA questions. So please feel free to call it. Additionally, we're also collaborating with our 27 opportunity centers, which you mentioned earlier, which we run across the state. And these centers are nested in not-for-profit organizations, so they are aware of the community, they're very familiar with the issues, and they're providing Know Your Rights workshops. For example, today again, Carescent, which is one of our centers, will be hosting a presentation at 4:30 today. There will be more over the weekend. And the hotline will provide you information on those Know Your Right workshops as well, for you to be able to go there and provide your questions in person. This is something, again, that our 27 centers are operating across the state. We're also connecting DACA students with counseling support. As I mentioned earlier, I know this is a moment of fear, and you can react often without thinking and not realizing that there is still, a hope, and there's still a process to follow, and we still have some time. So we realized that the need is counseling. For example, on Tuesday, our Hispanic Federation, which is one of our opportunity centers, together with North Manhattan Coalition, held a Know Your Rights, but also brought in counselors to provide some information specifically on that. So we're planning to do this a little bit across the board with our 27 centers across the state, to not just provide the Know Your Rights information, but also provide legal assistance to those that need it, all for free, again. And these are services that the governor has directed us to provide, as well as counseling services across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez-Murphy. Our next expert is Maribel Hernandez Rivera, who joins us from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and is Executive Director of Legal Initiatives. Maribel is a longtime immigrant rights activist and an accomplished public interest lawyer. She has experience in direct services, project management, and policy making. As head of MOIA's legal initiatives, Maribel is responsible for managing and promoting innovative access to justice programs for immigrants, including Action NYC and NY Citizenship. Maribel previously served as supervising attorney at Immigrant Justice Corps, where she directly supervised the Bureau of Immigration Appeals accredited representatives as they helped low-income New Yorkers apply for immigration benefits. Maribel is also a former Free Frank Maldeff Fellow. As a fellow, she represented individuals in immigration, detention, hearings, and submitted an amicus brief to the Supreme Court in support of the U.S. government in the Arizona versus United States case. Welcome, Maribel.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the City University of New York for inviting the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs to participate in this very important discussion. I am here to let CUNY's DACA holders know that the city stands with you, that the city is doing everything within its power to protect you and to fight for you. I want you to know that for many of us, this is personal. I came to the United States when I was 13. I was undocumented for many years, and I understand the fear of deportation. I understand the fear of having your family torn apart. I understand losing everything that you have worked for in this country. But I also understand that our community is resilient. I understand that our community is not going to give up, and we're going to keep on fighting. And I want you to know that you're not alone in this fight. I want you to know that there are thousands of allies ready to help you. I want you to know that the City of New York is here to help you. In New York City, we have about 30,000 dreamers who contribute to making this city the greatest city in the world, including many CUNY students. We stand with you, and we stand against the administration that would break families apart and prevent people from accomplishing their dreams. We are glad to support the state's lawsuit against the president and have submitted a declaration to protect DACA. We are working with cities across the country throughout our Cities for Action coalition to get Congress to pass the DREAM Act. And we are working to provide resources and information, particularly legal services, to dreamers across New York City. The mayor earlier this year made an announcement that New York City will be making the largest municipal investment in immigration legal services. We more than doubled our baseline funding, and we currently have more than $30 million in total funding to offer immigration legal services. To obtain immigration legal services, all you have to do is call 311 and say Action NYC, and you will be connected with a lawyer that will help you either apply to renew DACA or see if you can qualify for another more permanent relief. You should also know, in terms of information provision, we have organized more than 450 Know Your Rights forums since the election, and we continue to do so in this very important moment. And we are organizing a day of action where we will be at subways, at schools, at hospitals, providing information to the community so that everybody knows what this decision means and what needs to be done so that we can protect our DACA brothers and sisters. I want you also to know that in the City of New York, there are many benefits for which our New York City residents qualify regardless of immigration status. Everybody qualifies for IDNYC. That's the municipally issued ID, identification card. So all you have to do, again, 311, and they will make an appointment for you. Everybody in New York City qualifies for healthcare services, for education, for emergency food and shelter, for public safety, for legal services, for mental health services, and everybody is protected against discrimination. If you have any of those issues or you have any question, all you have to do is call 311 and people are there to serve you in your language. They are there to serve you 24 hours. We are there for you. So to conclude, I want CUNY DACA students to know that the city stands with you, that the city is fighting for you, and that if you have any questions, call 311. As for the non-DACA holders who are watching this live feed, I know there's many allies out there. If you want to volunteer, if you want to help people, one way you can do so is you can log on to our website, nyc.com/Moya, MOII, volunteer, and you can volunteer there. If you're a lawyer, you can volunteer to provide help with the DACA renewals. If you're a paralegal, you can do so. If you're a volunteer who speaks a different language, you can volunteer to help. There's so many ways to help, and all you have to do is log on to our website. Again, thank you, CUNY, for putting this together. We stand with you, and you're not alone.
Thank you, Maribel. And again, a big thank you to our two passionate and knowledgeable representatives from the state and from the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
To our viewers who have recently joined the live streaming, please post your questions in the comment box. We're collecting those questions and our experts will be answering them shortly. And also, please share the link with your friends on your timeline. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Alan Wernick, the director of CUNY Citizenship Now. Alan's also a professor of law at Baruch College and a columnist with the New York Daily News. Alan, let's hear from you about the White House's plan to phase out the DACA program and the timeline and deadlines they're using.
Thank you very much for having me here, and I want to say thank you to the Chancellor for his ongoing support for CUNY Citizenship Now, which is the largest university-based legal service program in the country, and I have a great honor to direct that program. And thank you, Vice Chancellor Martinez, for your leadership in this effort as well. First, I want to say that I'm very optimistic that the DACA program will be extended beyond the current application filing deadline of March 5th, which I'll go into in a minute. But I say that because, while I can't say for sure, no one really knows for sure what the Congress is going to do and what the President will do. I'm very optimistic that because those who have DACA have so much support, and those who have DACA and their friends are so active and so militant and so vigilant in defending their rights, that we will see something good come certainly by March 1st, 2018. What the President has done, what the Trump administration has done, is said that the program for DACA will no longer accept new applications. So if you qualify for DACA but you have not applied, you cannot apply now. If you have DACA, certainly your status is valid at least until your current status expires. If your status will expire between now and March 5th, you can apply for a 2-year extension, but you must make that application by October 5th. So I want to repeat that because that's very important. You should look at your employment authorization card. It will have an expiration date. If that expiration date is March 5th or prior, you can make an application by October 5th, but you will not have time beyond that to make that application. And you will be able to receive a 2-year extension. And you will be able to remain in DACA status and have employment authorization through that period. Those whose status expires after March 6th, those whose current cards expires March 6th or after, under current rules will not be able to apply. But as I said in the introduction, I believe something will be done between now and then which will allow you to be able to continue in DACA status. If a person has advanced parole, and those who have DACA know, I believe, about advanced parole, it's USCIS permission to travel abroad. If you have an existing advanced parole document that is not yet expired, you may use that document to travel abroad. We advise that anyone who has advanced parole, before they travel, they speak to an immigration law expert, either in CUNY or in some other institution, to make sure they won't have any particular problems in coming back into the United States. But as far as travel is concerned, nothing has changed other than the USCIS is no longer granting advanced parole to individuals with DACA. So if you don't have an advanced parole document, you will not be able to get permission to travel abroad. We are urging everyone with DACA and other undocumented students to seek counseling to see if you may qualify for some other benefit. Many of you have already done that. At CUNY Citizenship Now, we are committed to helping every single CUNY student who has DACA, whose status will expire by March 5th, 2018, to have their application, get help with their applications to be completed by October 5th. And we will be helping hundreds of others throughout New York City as well who do not have, who are not part of the CUNY family. To get information about and to make an appointment to see an immigration lawyer, you should write to us at citizenshipnowinfo@cuny.edu. And I look forward to answering your questions about the status of the DACA program.
Thank you so much, Alan. Also with us today, we're joined by Professor Elizabeth Newman from the CUNY Law School. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. We're really delighted to be a part of this effort. We're very privileged to be in New York and be in this institution that supports our immigrant population as much as we do. I wanted to just say that CUNY Law School is also here to support in this effort. We've worked with Citizenship Now for years. At the law school, we do have an immigration clinic that does direct representation, if need be, in court for defensive cases. We also have 30 years of alumni who are willing to pitch in. As soon as earlier when the executive orders came out, we at the law school did a shout out to our alumni, and within 36 hours we had over 60 people come together ready to roll up their sleeves, go to the airports, do what needed to get done, and those resources will continue to be available. I also wanted to say that we're really proud of our DACA students as well. The first New York attorney with DACA to be admitted to the bar was a CUNY law student graduate, and we're very proud of that and hope to continue in that legacy. We also want to just say that all of us know that DACA is not just about the immigration status, but everything that follows as well. And so we've been looking at some of the tangential issues. What happens to work? What happens to your ability to travel, even domestically? What happens to health insurance? What happens to those of our grad students who are looking to get licensed as professionals? So as those issues come up, we have resources at the law school to be researching it and coming up with positions that should help us all muddle through this. And I'll turn it over for questions.
Great. Thank you, Professor Newman. Our final expert today is Rachel Stevenson. Rachel was recently appointed as Assistant Vice Chancellor for Strategic Partnerships at CUNY. In this role, she supports implementation of the university's strategic framework. Rachel has worked at the City University of New York since 2009, most recently serving within the Office of Academic Affairs as University Director, overseeing a range of student-facing programs, including the CUNY Service Corps, the CUNY Cultural Corps, the Dream.US Scholarship Program, and the Program for Dreamers at CUNY. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much. It is a real privilege to be here today and be a part of this conversation with so many advocates and really passionate folks around this issue. I just want to say to those of you who are watching, we understand that there's a lot of uncertainty right? There are a lot of unanswered questions. And though there are some reasons to be optimistic and we are listening to those reassurances, I know emotionally, our emotions don't always respond to rational thinking, right? And so I have heard from many students and staff across the university that there are very complicated feelings that many of you are experiencing right now: anger, uncertainty, loneliness, anxiety, fear, frustration. And so one of the messages that we want to share today is that while these questions are said out loud and while information is being gathered, it's really important for all of you to think about what you need to feel whole and healthy and stable, and to acknowledge those complicated feelings and seek support if you need it. So there are a few things that I wanted to highlight in terms of your social emotional self and the things that you might need. We do know that there are some very practical needs that many of you are starting to think about, financial needs, especially given some of the unknown implications of this policy change. So I just want to let you know that you, as students of CUNY, can inquire about emergency assistance from your campuses, and what that means is different from campus to campus. But I'm talking about bookstore vouchers, potentially Metro cards, potentially gift cards for supermarkets or grocery stores. In order to inquire about what might be available, you should go to the Office of the Vice President for Student Affairs on your campus. That is the resource when you want to investigate emergency funding. I also wanted to address scholarship recipients of the Dream.us program. There are approximately 720 students at CUNY who received that scholarship, and it has been declared, and I think you've probably heard directly from the Dream.us too, but despite what happens in terms of your DACA status, the scholarship will not be taken away. So please do rest assured that the Dream.us will continue to fund your scholarships even if DACA status changes. Now, you are not alone. You are part of a community. I want you to know that there are opportunities to connect with that community as you navigate this time. We do know that many campuses have been holding emergency meetings. So, look out for that information, and perhaps some of you have already been participants in those meetings. But there are resources that exist on campus that existed before Trump's announcement a couple days ago and will continue to exist. Most campuses have dreamer clubs that are actively convening students and creating spaces for conversation and support. There is a student-led university-wide CUNY Dreamers club that is organized and comes together on a monthly basis. So that is a clear resource. We also have a grant-funded program for Dreamers at CUNY, sponsored by the Pershing Square Foundation, which supports community building and leadership development, and programming for that particular program will begin this fall. So, programmatically, there are opportunities for you to connect with other undocumented students throughout CUNY and really begin to, build relationships and build this network and find support from other students who are asking similar questions. I also want to note that there are mental health providers on campuses, and if you feel like you need support and are really struggling with some of the emotional repercussions of what's happening, you should definitely seek out that support. All of the colleges have mental health and counseling centers, so please ask where you can find those centers. Again, those are mental health and counseling centers at all of the colleges. In addition, you may find other offices on your campuses that can offer those kinds of supports. Offices of community engagement, offices of campus life and student life. These are places where you can go to ask questions about where to seek those counseling resources. I know some psychology departments are also offering, psychological centers and group counseling sessions. So please use the resources that are on campus and ask questions of folks on campus who can direct you to those services. So, I've spent a little bit of time talking about internal resources. We've had the great benefit of hearing from city and state representatives about services outside of CUNY. I just want to quickly name a couple of organizations that you could potentially look up and find resources from, including, of course, we heard, from the Office of New Americans and the Mayor's Office from Immigrant Affairs. I would just like to add to that list United We Dream as a major resource, the Anti-Violence Project, the New Economy Project, which actually has a Dreamer Loan Fund that you might want to look into. And finally, in terms of mental health, there is a whole network of hospitals in the city that offer support. So if you look up the New York City Health and Hospitals, you can find some resources that are potentially near you. So the last thing I'll say before we move into questions and answers is that please know that you are not alone. There are communities here at CUNY with resources, with real desire to help create opportunities for conversation around these uncertain times. Though we can't necessarily know the answers to all of these questions immediately, it's really helpful to be able to talk about those questions out loud and kind of struggle through these uncertain times with others. So please don't stay alone and afraid.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and a reminder that many of the resources that Rachel or others have mentioned will be posted online along with this broadcast for future viewing. Now we want to get to the questions that have been submitted, and I've been noticing questions coming across the feed and folks answering them as well. I think Alan's trying to do that while we're sitting here. But in any event, let's get to some of these questions, and whichever panelist wants to take a crack in their areas of expertise, just happy to have you jump in. So let me start with a very basic question. Can I still work with DACA?
Well, until your employment authorization card expires, you can still work with DACA. I've already heard from some DACA workers that their employers have been questioning them about their status. A person cannot be terminated solely because of their immigration status, provided they have employment authorization to be in the United States. Employers properly, if they're acting properly, should check with you as your DACA employment authorization card is about to expire, but not before. If you're terminated for another reason or you're laid off, you should be able to get employment with your unexpired employment authorization card. Once your card expires, however, you will not be able to be employed unless you manage to get employment authorization some other way, such as if you were to marry a U.S. citizen and be in the process of applying for permanent residence.
I'd like to add to that as well. In addition to the rules of employment, there's nothing to say that you can't work. Work is different from employment. So an employer has an obligation to check for appropriate work authorization. But if you're working as an independent contractor, your own business, the person engaging in your services is under no obligation to seek out what your status is. If they do know that they're engaging somebody who is not documented, they have an obligation not to engage in that relationship. But if it's an unknown, there's no obligation for that person to inquire.
I would also like to add that if you feel that for some reason your employment is being threatened while you still have that ability to work, to please call the ONA hotline there, because there also will be recourse to find out, what your rights are as an employee, and also follow up if there is a case where you're being terminated unjustly. And that again would be 800-566-7636. So there is recourse to find out also as well that you have that right to continue working.
Thank you, panelists. Let me get to another question that I've seen coming through the feed quite a bit, and it has a couple pieces to it. But what happens to my Social Security numbers, my driver's license, my state or city identification cards?
Well, your social security number will be your social security number, hopefully until you become a citizen. That will not change. However, many of the social security cards that were obtained with the DACA authorization do specify a date specific, and so it will be seen that, and particularly for work authorization purposes, you need both your social security number and your employment authorization. But the number will remain yours, and you can continue to use that number on applications or in banking ventures or wherever your social security number is asked.
As for the city ID does not require immigration status. The city ID is for anybody who lives in New York City. Therefore, it doesn't matter what your immigration status is, it doesn't matter what your income status is, you are able to get a city ID. And in fact, I'll leave it to the lawyers, but I think it's recommended that you start making sure that you do have alternative forms of ID. All you have to do to get ID NYC, again, is just call 311 and make an appointment, or you can go to our ID NYC website.
What about driver's licenses? Does anyone have a comment on that?
Well, the driver's license should be valid until its expiration date.
All right. Another question that I've seen a lot on the feed is, can I still apply to CUNY without DACA?
Yes, CUNY is open to all, no matter your immigration status. If you graduated from a New York State high school, or you have a New York State equivalency diploma or degree, and you apply to CUNY within 5 years, you can pay in-state tuition, again, no matter your immigration status. What DACA did is it added another group of people who qualified for in-state tuition, and those are people who did not meet the high school or educational requirements, but who had lived in the state for 1 year and who then attained DACA. But no matter your immigration status, CUNY is open to you. It has always been that way, at least in the more than 30 years that I have been at CUNY. And we will do everything we can to find financial support for all undocumented students, including those who have DACA.
And I would just add that some of the programming, for instance, the program for Dreamers at CUNY is open to DACA and non-DACA students. So, these programs are not simply serving undocumented students with DACA status.
And also, if I may add, in terms of public education in the city of New York is open to everybody, again, regardless of immigration status. So from pre-K all the way to till you graduate from high school, you have the right to go to public education, and we will never, ever ask your immigration status.
Another question, is it possible for the state of New York to implement its own DACA program?
Well, unfortunately, immigration law is federal, so a state cannot begin to implement its own immigration laws. So, no, unfortunately not.
Any other comments on that?
I would just say that one thing that we would like to have in New York, and I know our Chancellor has spoken in favor of this, is the New York State Dream Act. A New York State Dream Act would allow individuals who meet the in-state tuition requirements that I mentioned to you before to get financial aid. As it is now, government-funded financial aid for those with DACA and other undocumented students is not available, unlike some other states like California and Texas, which do allow undocumented students to get financial aid. So we're very optimistic and hopeful that in the coming year, the New York State Legislature, the governor has already spoken out in favor of the New York State Dream Act, which is this tuition program for undocumented students, and we're hopeful that the state legislature will pass it and will be enacted within the next 12 months.
I'd add just a quick tag along to that, which is under current federal immigration law, it is possible for states to pass affirmative laws, and many states have, allowing undocumented individuals to obtain public benefits. So that's the existing state of the law. That may change if Congress decides to go forward with immigration reform, which hopefully would also be beneficial. But so yes, legislatively in New York or at the federal level, many of these restrictions could change.
If I might add,
Yes.
I mean, it's true. Although federal law is what abides the immigration rules, in New York State, the governor's directives really to try and assist that immigrant in New York. You know, we're trying to provide all our services once you're here, and we're very lucky to be in New York State because we do have access to many of those services, even social benefits as well, food stamps and so on, for immigrants in general, not specifically based on undocumented status. So I want to reiterate that in a sense, across New York, not just the city, there's a lot there for the immigrant. Unfortunately, we are battling against the federal, which has that ultimate decision, but we're working in favor of protecting New Yorkers.
Well, and while we're on the subject of our legislators, both at the state or national level, there's another related question. Can Congress pass a law just to help DACA individuals? I think this is a reference to a DREAM Act, so if anybody might want to comment on that.
I mean, we all can. I mean, I think the answer is unquestionably yes. And I'm one of the few people that I know that thinks it's going to happen. But you can say you heard it here first. But there's no reason why Congress can't pass a DREAM Act only bill. That would be legislation that would grant some kind of more permanent legal status to those who now have DACA. And I'm optimistic they will. And in fact, this whole push and discussion around DACA may push the federal government, the House and Senate, to consider a more comprehensive immigration reform package.
I would say I love Alan's enthusiasm, and it's not unprecedented. There have been many times when Congress has acted to correct a situation for a group of people. People might remember NACARA worked with Central Americans, and Harifa worked with Haitians to correct situations and allow for paths for legalization. So I like that.
And there are some bills in Congress right now, like the Bridge Act, other than the DREAM Act, that are being considered. So we're hoping that this push allows for, reconsideration. And if I might say, some of those senators and congressmen backing these bills are Republicans. So there is that consideration and that hope.
And so we want to make sure that people know that definitely the mayor of New York City is pushing as much as he can through the Coalition of Cities for Action for the DREAM Act of 2017. That has been introduced. Now what we need to do is we need to pass it. So we need to really have everybody, allies, people who are watching, everybody right now calling the representative to say to pass the DREAM Act of 2017.
Well, and so I guess the flip side of that question is, absent any change in legislation, either at the state or the national level, the question of, am I at risk when my DACA expires?
I would like to answer that because I have a particular point of view, and other people I hope will comment. If your DACA expires and you're not eligible for the renewal, and neither Congress nor the President does anything about it, you will be undocumented and subject to deportation. Because in order to qualify for DACA, you had to have been out of lawful status. So we know that if that ends, you will be subject to deportation. But based on my many years of study of immigration law and history and politics, I don't see that the federal administration will make a priority of trying to deport individuals with DACA. I know many of the people with DACA are very concerned because they have submitted information, their addresses, their names, their family information to the federal government. And though the federal government has said it will not use that information in the normal course of business for enforcement, we never can promise, and I certainly can't promise, that they won't do that. Still, I would be very, very surprised if that were to happen. So what I am encouraging people to do is to try to live your life as best you can, advance your education, advance in your career, definitely take advantage of the educational and social service resources that New York City and New York State provide. And like I said, I remain optimistic.
And if I may add to that, as I mentioned, I myself was undocumented. I did not live in New York State or in New York City. It was not as welcoming as we're here. But nevertheless, we didn't know what was going to happen, but we continued to study, we continued to work really hard, and eventually here I am. I never thought I would be here. It was every day you didn't know when things were going to happen. You didn't know whether you were going to see your family. But that's where I go back to resiliency. And I go back to resiliency because we know that we're going to continue to work hard. You should know that you're not alone. And you should also know that New York City is a welcoming city. What does that mean? There's many services open for everybody. IDNYC is a great example of what we can create as a city without having to worry about whether you have immigration status or not. We have more than 1 million people who have IDNYC, and we did recently an evaluations that showed that people who have IDNYC feel that they belong. They feel like they are all people in New York City are New York City residents regardless of immigration status. And that's one thing that you should know, that your elected officials are here to support you, and that we really want to make sure that you feel part of this great city, because thanks to you, we are one of the greatest cities in the world.
Well, on to some resource questions specifically for CUNY students. As a DACA student who pays for tuition out of pocket, are there resources to help me pay for my education?
So, I mean, we talked about emergency funding that's for, not for tuition. And there are some external scholarships outside of the Dream.us that can provide funding for tuition, but that requires applying. It's not necessarily something that can be immediately provided. But for someone who does have DACA status, the Dream.us is an option, but application periods are a little bit later. And for others, it requires a little bit of research into some of the scholarship opportunities that are out there. I mentioned earlier that there is an entity at CUNY, a student-run organization called the CUNY Dreamers, and there's actually a CUNY Dreamers hub on the CUNY website, which lists scholarship opportunities and other things. And so if you search for CUNY Dreamers on the CUNY website, you can see a list of opportunities beyond the Dream.us for students around tuition scholarships.
Another resource question, now relating to health insurance and other items. Can DACA holders continue to apply for health insurance? Are they eligible for Medicaid?
Yes, I mean, there are eligibility, other considerations to take into account, but please, yes, definitely there is a significant number of DACA students that are eligible for Medicaid. And maybe one of the questions is if Medicaid is paid federally, how does that actually apply and how does it work? Because the state normally pays for half of it. In New York State, the state is responsible for the full Medicaid, has taken that responsibility, understanding that often under federal law, undocumented individuals who are in status or under the protection of the law do not qualify. But for New York State, yes. To finding out the specific issues of that, I would say you need to go into most likely our hotline again, which will provide you the information of where to go to apply for Medicaid. But there are other restrictions, but in general, blanket. I mean, it's hard to say yes to everybody because there's so many specifics, but it is the policy of New York State to assist the undocumented with Medicaid.
And if I could just go back to the question of the financial aid, because I apologize, I needed to look up the information. There are a couple places that you can go to find information about private scholarships outside of the City University of New York. One is the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and you do not have to be Mexican in order to qualify for many of the scholarships there. And you can find that information at maldef.org. That's MALDEF.org. Another good place to find scholarship listings is UnitedWeDream.org. That's all one word, UnitedWeDream.org. And at both those locations, you'll find lists of institutions around the country, foundations and private donors who will make financial aid available to undocumented students.
If I may add on that point, when I was applying to college, I was undocumented, and I didn't know whether, one, they were going to accept me, and there were colleges that didn't accept me because I was undocumented, but there were other colleges that gave me private tuition scholarships. So I think that's a really important point, that if you look in the internet, try to be resourceful, speak to people, because there are many people out there who are willing to help you out. I can tell you personally, all of my education was paid by generous private funders. So that's really important to note. as to health services. In the city of New York, Rachel mentioned this, we have the Health and Hospitals Corporation. You are able to get health services there regardless of your immigration status.
And if I
Go
may
ahead.
add also too, I think it's important to add not just the health status, the health services, but also SNAP, for example, for food stamp, that you're also eligible for that. So again, it's about reaching out to the resources, and then the hotline I mentioned for the Office for New Americans, just Googling us, you will find, and you call anytime during the week from 9 to 8, and someone there will guide you to the nearest place to go get assistance to apply.
Thank you. Lots of other questions, but for folks who may have joined us after some of the remarks of our experts, let's go to the question again of where can I get legal help? And knowing that we're going to post resources on our Facebook, but maybe just saying again where folks can reach out for legal help.
Well, let's start, if I can just start with CUNY students. If you're a CUNY student, you should call us at 212-652-2055. Even better, to email us at citizenshipnowinfo, all one word, citizenshipnowinfo@cuny.edu. You can also go to our website, www.cuny.edu/citizenshipnow. And we will arrange for you to see, for DACA or for other immigration law needs, we will arrange for you to meet with one of our attorneys to make sure you get the assistance and help you need. And as was mentioned, New York City through 311 will refer you to an agency in New York City. And Laura, perhaps you want to give the state information?
Again, it's 1-800-566-7636, and through that number as well, we'll connect you to free legal services as well, for regardless of status. And I'd like to emphasize the question of, even if you're DACA, someone mentioned earlier, about being able to qualify again to, reapply. There are possibilities that when you meet with an attorney, there might be an identification that you qualify for a different status. So please do reach out, even if you think, okay, I'm not eligible to renew. There is the possibility. Reach out to an attorney through these services provided, because there is a possibility that a good attorney will find out alternatives, if it's applicable to your case. But please do.
Yeah. And also to note that we're lucky, because if you're a CUNY student, if you live in New York City, or if you live in New York State, you have resources. So you do not have to depend on the friend across the street. You do not have to depend on your friend, on your family member who said, well, my friend did so and so, and therefore I can get a green card. Please do not depend on people who do not know what they're doing, even if they're well-meaning. It's super duper important that you meet with an immigration attorney, that you meet with a qualified representative who actually knows what they're talking about and can help you, because even well-meaning help can land somebody in deportation proceedings. So it's really important at this moment that you meet with people who know what they're doing.
And if I may add again to that, it's very, very true that it is risky to who you're reaching out for assistance, even if they are well-meaning. This is a time where a lot of fraud is, comes about. And it's so important to know that your best information is an immigration attorney or a BIA-accredited individual that is working for an organization that is trusted. So once again, I know we're going to be posting the information on how to reach for the Office for New Americans, for MOA, for all the other services. CUNY, I'm proud to say, is one of our centers. So please make sure that you're going to a resource that it has a history in immigration policy.
And on that point, if you see fraud being committed, if you see people being taken advantage of, please report it. Report it for yourself, but report it for the community also. Because we can go and make sure that that stops. But if we don't know that that's happening, there's nothing we can do, and then thousands and thousands of people get affected. So please report it. You can do so anonymously, or you can do it so in so many different ways, but reporting fraud is very important.
Yeah, and it's the hotline, the 800-586-7636, which is the reporting center for our organizations across the state. So again, not just the city, but also across the state. If you hear that that is a confidential number where you can reach out, they will refer it to the correct district attorney, attorney general, and follow up on that. But it is confidential, again, like you mentioned, Martin. Thank you.
Thanks. A couple very specific questions, and I think the answer is going to depend. Can a person whose DACA status expired before September 5th, 2017 renew?
The current understanding that we have, and there's some vagueness in the administration's presentation on these issues, that person cannot apply now for an extension. It's too late. You would have had to apply September 5th or after. So if you already were expired and for whatever reason you decided not to apply for an extension or renewal, it's too late. But it's something that advocates will be bringing up with the administration and hopefully trying to get them to, maybe we can get them to change the policy.
But on that point, timing is really important. So right now we do know that we have an October 5th deadline for a group of DACA holders. Please do not wait until October 5th. Do not wait until October 4th. Let's start doing the renewal applications right now. There's services here. Let's make sure that we do as much as we can to make sure that as many DACA holders who are able to renew.
Some questions about travel, and I know Alan mentioned this in your initial remarks, but essentially, should DACA holders with advanced parole travel? I mean, they're looking for advice on
Yes.
whether that makes sense or not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see anything has changed since the President's announcement. If you have a valid, and the Immigration Services has said this, the Department of Homeland Security, if you have a valid, unexpired permission to travel and you return before that permission ends, I feel comfortable with you traveling abroad. But I urge, as I always urge individuals who are traveling abroad, and this was before the President's announcement as well, that the individual, before traveling, speak to an immigration law expert. We have many free services available, just to make sure there's nothing in particular in your immigration history or personal history that would give you a particular problem at the border. But after you do that, I feel comfortable with people traveling. There's always a chance you can have a problem, but no more now than you would have had prior to the President's announcement.
Right. And just to say that's no longer an option though. They're not accepting or entertaining new applications to travel, but those that already have approved applications, that's a different story.
I know I've seen a lot of FAQs that are out there from various universities and other organizations, and one piece that's always emphasized in relation to this issue of advanced parole and travel is just a reminder to folks that that individual immigration and customs officer has a lot of discretion when you're traveling and re-entering and exiting the country, so it's something to keep in mind. Let's see. Question, so there's a group of questions about personal safety. I can kick it off with, how safe should I feel about letting people know I have DACA? It's followed up with a question of, should I, basically be out there, go on TV, talk about it, will this make me a target? So those are the related questions.
I mean, I think one, it's a personal issue, right? Different people have different comfort levels with risk. I think that I think it's very tough. If everybody had taken the safe route, we probably wouldn't have as much advancement on the Dreamer as a possibility. But it's something each individual needs to really decide for themselves, the level of risk. I wouldn't recommend going out and getting arrested at demonstrations. That puts you at a higher risk level, but you need to assess in your own life who you are disclosing your status to.
And I think talking to others who can relate is a good way to wrestle with some of those questions. I mean, it's hard to think about that just in your own head and kind of arrive at the answer. So I think this is another opportunity to pitch some of the communities that there are on campus for you to plug into, so that you can pose these questions. I can say anecdotally that some CUNY students in particular have stepped forward under the circumstances. There's a lot of interest, right? And various media outlets have contacted us and asked to speak to students. And there have been students, despite their uncertainty and fear, who have stepped forward and shared their stories. 100% okay if students don't want to do that, and those who have made that choice. So I would say, to find others who are facing some of the same questions, within these contexts that we've described, so that you can really see where a number of people are and figure out where on the spectrum you fall.
Yeah, I would want to add just CUNY is a safe community. You can talk to your teachers if you're feeling stressful, if you need an extension on a deadline. I won't speak for teachers, but people need to know what's going on. If there's some kind of personal crisis in your life, or you're facing something having to do with your immigration status or any stressful situation, this is a safe space, and you should feel free to speak to people within our walls.
And
Go ahead.
as for those people who are not DACA holders who are watching this, who are allies, this is why it's really important that for you all who feel safe, for you all who don't have to worry about your immigration status, that you raise your voice. Because for a DACA holder, you really have to make that balance of, do I do it, do I not do it, and there's all these risks. You're a U.S. citizen and you don't have anything to lose, well, you can raise your voice to make sure that people know what DACA holders are going through. You can be calling your congressperson. You can be going to rallies. You can be doing so many things to make sure that this issue is advanced, and so that DACA holders are protected, so that it's not always falling on DACA holders' shoulders either. We need everybody at this moment to unite to make sure that the DREAM Act passes and that the DACA holders are protected.
Well, and speaking of stress and worry, there's a question, because clearly DACA recipients aren't the only ones in these times to be worried. There are lots of undocumented students without any sort of DACA status, and then there are their family members and loved ones. So the question is, are there social services available for DACA family members as well?
So in New York City, we have what is called, we have mental health services for everybody. Everybody in New York City is able to access them. All you have to do is call 1-888-NYC-WELL. People are ready right now to help anybody, whether it is a DACA holder, an undocumented immigrant, or anybody else. So 1-888-NYC-WELL. Those services are free, they're confidential, and they're open to anybody.
Once again, and the same thing goes for the state, across the state, and also, of course, New York City, where you call the 800-566-7636, we will refer you to different agencies across the state where they are providing that mental health support. We also provide it irrespective of document status and family membership, of course. Most families in New York State with the DACA are mixed status, so I am sure it will be affecting someone in that family. Even if he or she happens to be a citizen, it is very possible that a sister or brother or father or grandmother or grandparent can be either undocumented or under a DACA status. So please, it isn't about selecting a service just because you're under a certain status. It's the family unit, and we understand that. At our opportunity centers, as I had mentioned earlier, we are very aware right now that the mental health is a very important aspect. So our Know Your Rights training, some of our agencies are responding to that need and bringing in counselors. So, but it's not just for the DACA. You can see probably that we're targeting it right now as DACA services, but the family is entitled to come, even citizens that are going to be affected by that crisis as well.
Well, so I think we've run out of the live feed of questions, except for one last area which maybe makes sense to close on, and that's a couple questions specifically about CUNY and what CUNY's prepared to do to protect its students. And so one of the questions is, what about releasing student data? What is CUNY prepared to do? Will CUNY be a safe space for people who need resources during these difficult times? So one of the things I just wanted to put out there is we, if we haven't already done it, are going to repost the statement that CUNY published some time ago about what would CUNY do if ICE were to come on campus. I think the university has made very strong statements about protecting students and their information to the full legal extent that CUNY can. I know that there are faculty who want to go beyond the legal limits, but in any event, I thought you all might want to comment on some of these questions about what the institution is prepared to do to protect student information, the students themselves.
Well, there's certain laws that protect student information. The government needs authority in order to obtain that information. The policy of the university is to not provide information without an appropriate legal document requiring the university to provide it. So just asking for it will not be sufficient. You know, CUNY is the most immigrant-friendly university in the country. And I know that because I know a lot about what goes on at other universities. And we will do everything we can, not just to protect the information, to protect the students, provide legal support. And from what I hear from the college presidents, from the counselors, from the student leaders, if you heard the chancellor today talk about his and the university's support for the lawsuit that is now pending against the federal administration to extend DACA. So I think from these things you can see that we are going to do everything we can to protect your rights, defend your rights, and to ensure that you're able to continue your education and remain in the United States.
Any faculty viewpoints on this or agreement?
I think it's been covered. I mean, I would just say though that, you know, immigration status is rarely a direct line, and there's, you know, you've got to move forward with your life. Everything that you're doing positive in your life becomes an asset when and if there's a new opening, either created by Congress or created by the circumstances of your life that might allow you to then legalize. So we want you to continue to move forward and you know, be positive.
Well, and you know, I close with what has, you know, been discussed so much in education circles for a long time. It goes back to the old adage that education is something that no one can take away from you. And so we know that a lot of DACA or undocumented students may become demotivated when they believe that they're not being supported. And you know, I've talked to undocumented students themselves who talk about the fact that students aren't going to do well in high school because they think there's nothing to look forward to. If they're not able to work ultimately, what's the value of that degree? But I think we all here would emphasize that it is still critical to obtain your education, that is portable, that stays with you no matter what your life circumstance ends up being. And so we all strongly encourage you to continue to pursue your education and know that here at CUNY, we're here to help you. So I want to give a big thank you to all our panelists today and the time that they've spent here. I hope that each viewer has heard something that has been helpful to them, that you've had a question answered. And I want to remind you that this broadcast will stay up and that CUNY will continue to answer questions as they come through. So please continue to follow CUNY on Facebook and to check in with #DefendDACA. Thank you again for being part of this live session, and have a great evening.